Yo, what's good, Spirit Squad? It's your boy Dre. What we're doing today is we're taking a look at the newest set coming out to Magic, and that's Kaldheim, and exploring all of the sweet new tools that we just got as Spirits Pilots because there's a lot. And the first thing I want to talk about as far as Kaldheim's concerned is going to be one of the first cards that was actually spoiled from the set, and that's going to be Renar the Ever Watchful. So this thing's actually got a lot of text on it, right? So it's going to be a flying 2/3 for 4, which the stat line sucks, but that's kind of in line with Spirits anyway. We're playing a bunch of 2/2s. So it's got a lot of text though. So the first thing that you foretell each turn costs 0, and because this was one of the first sets spoiled for Kaldheim, we had absolutely no idea whether that was going to be a relevant line of text or not. We have no clue what foretell does. Now we do. So you pay 2 mana, you foretell whatever your thing is, you put it face down, not face up, and that's super relevant, and you later on get to cast your spell at a discounted cost. Honestly, that's pretty sweet. So there is a 3 mana counter spell in the format, or rather there will be a 3 mana counter spell in the format that costs 2 if you foretold it. There's Cyclonic Rift for 6 that instead costs 3 if you foretold it, which is mind-blowing. Like, I'm sorry, if you play Commander and you're watching this, apologies in advance for every single time that card ruins your day, because that's going to be a thing that happens fairly often. And there's even like an Entreat the Angels that if you foretold it, you get to pay, what is it, XX and white to make some angel tokens instead of just paying 4 for 1 token. And all of those cards are going to be pretty relevant with the foretell mechanic. So Renar's got some text on it. Personally, I don't think that's good enough to see play in either Modern or Pioneer, but it's still a card that'll definitely be relevant for Commander, and it's going to have another set of text lines that I still don't think is quite good enough right now, but has the potential to be good later. And that's going to be the part where whenever you exile a card from your hand, irrelevant, or something from the table, very relevant, then you get a 1/1 flyer each time you do this. And it's not like once per turn, it's not during your turn only, it's not sorcery speed, none of that shenanigans, right? You just get to do it every time. So this means that every time you like path to exile something, this means that every time you Skyclave Apparition something, you're going to get an upside of having a token generated for each of these, and the tokens are flyers. So that has the potential to be a very relevant line of text. And while Path to Exile is certainly the best exiling removal spell that we have access to in any of those formats, if we get any other exiling removal that is at least kind of better than like Seal Away / Isolate / Baffling End, then Renar's got the potential for some very real upside if you can ever untap with it. So that's a card that, while I don't think it's going to be terribly relevant, it has a lot of potential, so look out for that one. Another relevant thing that's going to be in Kaldheim is the fact that there's a bunch of changelings in this set. And of course, all changelings count as spirits, so that's fair game for us. I think there's only 2 really relevant ones for us specifically though, and the first one is going to be Masked Vandal. And Masked Vandal, I don't think is going to be great because we don't really control what goes in our graveyard, but it's still kind of playable, I think. And what it does is every time, or rather, when it comes into the battlefield, not every time, you can exile a creature from your graveyard, and you get to get rid of an enchantment or an artifact from your opponent's side of the table. So while that's not necessarily controllable because we can't guarantee that a creature's ever going to go to our graveyard, that's still a card that has the potential for some sweet upside and counts as a spirit. So maybe it sees play, maybe it doesn't. And the other one I think is actually good for Bant Pilots, and that's going to be Realm Walker. And this card seems dope. So you name spirits as your type, whatever, cool. And now you basically have a collected company-able build your own conspicuous snoop. So like you just get to cast spirits off the top of your deck. If you have rattle chains, you can cast them at instant speed. And this is going to be really sweet because now you have effectively an extra card in your hand that comes from the top of your deck all the time. And this means that you can cast like Spell Quellers off the top of your deck. If your opponent likes Supreme Verdicts, you can cast a Selfish Spirit off the top of your deck and, you know, get rid of all of that text. This card actually has some pretty wild potential, and I think its best home is probably going to be in Bant Pioneer, because most of the premier removal in Pioneer can't get rid of a Realm Walker without extra help. For example, Fatal Push well, Realmwalker costs 3, so you need the extra help of getting rid of a permanent there for Revolt. You know, all the cards like Shock and Wild Slash and all of those guys can't get rid of Realmwalker without extra help. Lightning Strike can, but like Wizard's Lightning actually requires a wizard to be on the table, and while the red deck certainly can do that, it's not guaranteed, so it could just cost 3 for them to get rid of a Realmwalker. And most of the other removal spells in the format will just cost enough mana to the point where you can protect Realmwalker with like a Rattle Chains. So there's a lot of very real upside to being able to cast Realmwalker in a BAM deck, and I think it's probably going to see play as at least a 1 or 2 of at some point in those decks. Who knows? And I think all of the other changelings in the set, though, are honestly kind of bad, so I'd probably avoid those. But we do have more tools coming, actually a lot. The next one I want to talk about is Vega the Watcher. And for any of y'all that play Yu-Gi-Oh!, this card is like almost literally card of safe return. If you have played Yu-Gi-Oh!, you know how busted card of safe return is. I do not think that Masked Vandal has that much potential for any of the formats that we typically play, so like Modern, Pioneer, Historic, etc. I don't think the card's going to do anything there. But in older formats, card of safe return is not okay. And this counts every time you cast something from a place other than your hand, right? So like, if you dread return something, you're probably already getting value out of things like, say, Bridge from Below and Friends. But like, you're going to draw a card on top of all of that too. So like, imagine the potential there. So like, Vintage just goes, okay, well, here's like a dread return, we go and get Vega the Watcher, and now we have other things for dread return. We're dredging cards into the graveyard, we're casting Basking Rootwallas, which are free creatures, and draw a card now for every time you get to do something like that. It's just super busted. So like, if you have this card on a table and you, for example, play like Yawgmoth's Will, every single time you cast a card from your graveyard, you're also drawing a card on top of that. If you're doing things that are from exile, haha, Foretell was just a thing, then you also get to draw a card for each time you cast a card from the exile, because that's where foretelling puts cards. So Vega the Watcher has crazy potential to be absolutely busted. And it even combos with Realmwalker, because like, you know, if you're casting cards from your library, that's not your hand, draw a card. This card has insane potential, and I am looking very forward to people who are, well, better at brewing than myself, play with this card until it just does something completely broken. This is my not so secret spec for low-key best card in the set. Like, I think this thing is going to break an archetype of some sort in half. I don't know what the archetype is, because I'm not a brewing genius. But when somebody does break this card in half, you heard it here first. So that's enough on Vega the Watcher, although I'm ultra hyped to see this thing do big things. But Kaldheim also has a bunch of other non-spirit tools that very directly help us out a lot. And I think one of the low-key big players is actually going to be a Null. And a Null is not a new card, it's a reprint, it's been made 100 times, right? And all it does is, for 1 blue mana, you get to counter any enchantment or artifact spell, which, in specifically Historic, is a huge deal, right? So, like, the entire Paradox Engine deck, well, that deck's like 95% artifacts, so for 1 blue mana, you just get to counter all of those things. Super big game. You also get to counter all of the enchantments that come out of, like, the 9 live Solemnity combo deck. And again, you just get to, you know, do your attacking. Maybe you're like holding up mana for Collect a Company, but they're gonna play like a 9 live, so instead of casting your Collect a Company, you now just get to annul their thing and like flash another creature into play. This card has a lot of potential to be very big game, and I've played it to some success in formats like Pioneer, where artifacts and enchantments at least are relevant, and I think in Historic it's even more so. So introducing a card like a Null to Pioneer is pretty big game for us. And from here, everything else is even better for spirits. And one of the first big changes is going to be the addition of blue-white and blue-green pathway lands. And about time. So, anybody who has played blue-white spirits in Pioneer knows, and this is not a guess, this is not a presumption, we straight up know that Port Town has always been the worst land in blue-white spirits in Pioneer. That card sucks. Fuck Port Town. But we just got a blue-white pathway. Port Town has no text anymore. It's fantastic. So, like, we no longer have to sit there and cry because we drew Port Town Glacial Fortress and now our deck sucks. No, none of that. We just get to go ahead, play good lands, and we've got an extremely stable mana base now. We get to just play Hallow Fountain, Glacial Fortress, Blue-White Pathway, and just like a pile of islands and plains, and now our deck actually looks good. And this enables blue-white spirits to actually want to play Mutavault again without being really embarrassed because you were stuck playing like Mana Confluence or Port Town in your deck. Now we don't have to worry about that mess anymore. We just get to play good cards. It's so nice. We also get a ridiculously stable mana base for Bant Spirits in Pioneer. And this is also going to be true for Historic, but Historic, I actually don't even know that the mana was really a problem for Bant's Historic, but it's definitely a problem in Pioneer where like where the burn deck is good enough to the point where playing cards like Temple Garden is a real liability. Well, now we don't have to deal with that mess anymore because you get to just play like blue-green pathway, and the only green card that's in Bant Spirits outside of maybe the Realm Walkers that we're going to start playing were Collected Company, so you don't need a green until turn 4. Now you don't have to play cards like Breeding Pool or Temple Garden or anything to get to your green mana. You don't even really need to play like Branch Loft Pathway, which was the previous compromise. You just get to play a good blue-green pathway that you already wanted to play, and that way you have a painless way to play like Mausoleum Wanderer on turn 1, Spectral Sailor on turn 1, or your green land on turn 4 without having to resort to things like Botanical Sanctum, which can be an awkward draw on your turn 4, or a basic forest, which bleh. So no more of that mess. Also, having a blue-green pathway specifically opens up the option of playing blue-green spirits again. And this is a deck that was pretty popular. That's half true. This is a deck that I played and liked. That's more accurate. Over the course of the summer. And in Pioneer, it plays a lot like a mono-blue temple deck that you might remember from a previous standard format. So now you get to actually play like a good mana base in that deck, because honestly the mana was terrible in that deck. So you get to play Botanical Sanctum, you get to play blue-green pathway. If you want to, you can jam like 1 or 2 Hinterland Harbors, but with blue-green pathway now existing, that's not even necessary. And you get to play like 4 Breeding Pools, 4 Botanical Sanctums, 4 blue-green pathway, and the rest of your lands you can basically do what you want with them. Maybe it's a giant pile of islands, your choice. But now the mana is almost painless, almost completely independent of whether you have an island or not, and it's actually good. It's sweet. So you just get to have a very, very stable mana base, and that is always something to be celebrated. Because, like, nobody wants to play, like, Yavimaya Coast in a format where Burn is one of the best decks. Like, that sucks. That is such a bad feel. And now we don't have to worry about it anymore. Just like Port Town, Yavimaya Coast has almost no text, and we love that. So that is a super big game. And finally, we get to talk about the biggest point of speculation in Spirits, and that's going to be our new 1-drop, Ascendant Spirit. So Ascendant Spirit has a ton of text. Like, this card's actually really sick. And we're going to go ahead and kind of slide right over here to Ascendant Spirit, and it's got a lot of similarities to a card like Figure of Destiny. For 1 mana, it's a 1/1, kind of the same thing, right? It starts off as just a spirit. But for 2 snow mana, you can make this thing a Spirit Warrior. That's a 2/3. And if it's a warrior for 3 mana, you can put a flying counter on it, and it becomes a Spirit Warrior Angel, and then it's also a 4/4. So now it's a 4/4 flyer. And if it is an angel, you get to pay 4, and you get to put 2+1 counters on it, and it gets to draw a card every time you hit a player with it. And that ability is not a one-time thing either. So if you just for some reason find yourself with like no cards that you want to cast and just like a butt ton of extra mana, you can keep paying 4 mana to keep putting +2 counters on it. So that's actually going to be really sick. And I think this card existing is not going to be something that's playable really in Modern, because honestly the lands in Modern are way too good to want to play this and a snow mana base rather than getting to play cards like Seachrome Coast and Hallowed Fountain, and well, Flooded Strand doesn't affect this, but like Moorland Haunt and Cavern of Souls. Like, our lands in Modern are way too good to really want to consider this. And I also don't think that we want to play this card in anything like Blue White or Bant Spirits, because both of those decks already have the cards that we want them to have. Like, Blue White has, especially with the addition of Blue White Pathway, it's got great lands to make both the colors, and the same goes for like Blue Green, and to some extent the same goes for Bant. Thanks to the pathways that just came out, all 3 of those decks have ridiculously stable mana bases that we honestly would just ruin by playing snow lands. So I don't think this is going to see play in either of those formats. However, where I do think this card is going to see play is actually going to be Historic. So for all you guys who are on Arena, and gals, or anybody else, for everybody who wants to play on Arena, I think Ascendant Spirit is going to be super lit. And I've actually drawn up a bit of a staple, or not a staple, a bit of a sample list here for a mono blue snow cover island mana base, which is just 20 snow covered islands, y'all. We're not fancy. That gets to accommodate Ascendant Spirit and just plays like a good mono blue tempo deck. So what we got here is just a bunch of spirits and Brazen Borrower. So we get to play like Ascendant Spirit and Spectral Sailor on turn 1. We get to suit either of those up with a Curious Obsession for a good early game attacking mana base there, or good attacking base there. We get to play like Rattle Chains, and Supreme Phantom is good turn 2 plays. Nebelgast Herald and Shacklegeist will help control combat so that we can just do the same thing that we're able to do in other formats. We get to attack, they don't. We get to fly, they can't block us. Life is great. We attack them, we draw cards, be it with either Curious Obsession or the final ability on Ascendant Spirit if need be. We get to protect our cards with 6 main deck counterspells, the Lofties and the Spell Pierces. We also get dive downs to protect our cards, especially since we're trying to suit them up with Curious Obsession. And that's our deck. It's really simple, but I think this is going to be really effective too. And this might be one where Supreme Phantom might actually not make my final list of this deck. Because just a sorcery speed thing on turn 2 might actually not be good enough for what we're trying to do here. But that aside, I still think I like where this is going. Everything but Brazen Borrower is a spirit. So Supreme Phantom does have the potential to make your creatures much bigger than they would normally be. And that's why it's there. But I don't know that it's going to make the final version of this deck. Whatever, either way, this is just a prototype. But will we see potential here? There's, again, a very stable, painless mana base, which is fantastic. That's always where we want to be in life. We could do something slightly fancy and take out, say, 2 of those lands for 2 copies of Jwari Disruption or something cute like that. I'm choosing to not do that right now, but maybe that'll change later. Who knows? But you get to play a Curious Obsession Curious Obsession tempo based game. You get to draw some cards along the way. All of your stuff flies, none of theirs does. And you'll notice that unlike the mono blue tempo decks that are generally playing things like 3 mana counter spells and Tempest Djinn, we are not trying to play cards like Tempest Djinn. So we can play just about everything in our deck at instant speed, and the stuff that we don't get to play at instant speed, we do get to pump mana into, and we just get our natural 2-for-1s with things like Nebelgast Herald controlling combat and Brazen Borrower just being 2 cards in itself. We have a mana dump in Ascendant Spirit now. So there's plenty of things to do when your opponent is playing scared of your counterspells, because you have those as well. So I think there's actually a lot of potential to be had here. And that's going to be just a thing that I think, somebody who plays a lot more Arena than myself will be able to explore and probably play to some real competency. So I think there's potential there. But that's gonna be really it for our Kaldheim snapshot here. And I'm glad to have been able to go over all of the cool things that we have access to now that we know all the cards in this set. So if you think I left out any of the spirits that you think have potential, there are, of course, more spirits in the set, but I think we went over the ones that all have, like, real deck building potential here. But if you think I missed one, let me know in the comments. And if you have, like, a sample deck list, or you think you have, like, an idea for any of the potential unlocked by the pathways or anything like that, then yeah, feel free to let me know. But that's going to be our Kaldheim snapshot here. Thanks so much for watching, and yeah, I'll see y'all on the next one. Have a great day.